Do you know what the hardest punch is in the world? Do you know how to throw it? How to execute it so that you can keep your head defensive? There's so many aspects to this punch which we have to cover today, so let's get right into it. What punch am I talking about? What would I define as the hardest punch in the world? Keeping in mind, of course, that it's going to change from person to person. But if we take the average person off the street, spend 1 hour throwing punches with them, and then look at the majority of KOs that come out of the UFC, we're going to be talking about the overhand. Many people are only taught straight punches, hooks, and uppercuts. We kind of think of those as the main punches to throw. The overhand is one which we have to learn because the power behind it is devastating, but for many reasons, it's not always touched upon as much as it should be. But before we get into all the details of this devastating punch, I want to share with you the gloves that you could win right now. In the description, there is a link. You can get registered. These are Leone 12-ounce gloves, leather. They were given to me by Glory years ago, right after I won this belt. They said, oh, here's a little gift. You can give it to somebody on your, well, I didn't have a channel back then, but somebody on your social media, but I never got around to it. They have not been worn before. I just took them out of their bag so that you guys can actually see them. Get registered, and I'm gonna wrap these up and send them to one lucky winner. I'm just gonna strap on some gloves here so I can explain this overhand a little bit more detailed. One of the reasons that a lot of people don't have success with throwing overhands is they don't understand the body mechanics, but in addition, they don't understand what their hands should be doing so that they're gonna land with their knuckles. If you just kind of swing like this with a straight arm, you're just gonna end up open hand slapping somebody or landing with this area. Neither of those is going to be as powerful as coming down with the fist. So first, let's talk about the actual technique behind this punch. Very similar to throwing a cross, we rotate the body. Our back heel disconnects from the ground to help us with that rotation, and I need to get my rear shoulder all the way to the front. Would I ever throw an overhand off the lead arm? No. This is strictly for me off the back hand. Now, what I'm trying to do as I throw that motion in there is to get the arm coming downwards. It's very similar to a hook, except instead we're going to be dropping down. The reason I find this punch to be so powerful is we can actually incorporate a bit of a drop in the body. It's not just simply rotate, it's rotate and drop, and that drop is fantastic because it's going to get our head off the center line, but we're going to touch on that in a little bit. For now, I want you to imagine that you are throwing a hook, but the hook is rotating slightly down. You need to squeeze that shoulder right up to your chin, and that is going to help you protect on this side while getting that proper overhand mechanic. Now, depending on the range of the punch, we might have to just curl the wrist a tiny bit so we can land with the knuckles. If we add that drop as we throw like this, there's so much power behind this punch, and it's just a matter of me catching the correct angle. The reason I like the drop and I like the lean in is if somebody comes forward and they throw a big punch, you can evade and you have their force of moving forward meet your force. But even if they don't rush in and you just do a big double jab, you can incorporate some footwork, a big step forward as you drop your weight to help increase the power and the ability to follow through on this punch. Some of the more common mistakes when throwing this is, number one, people don't catch the correct angle with their arm. They end up doing something like way too bent or too straight. We want to find that fine, detailed sort of position here where we're just like so. Not a 90-degree angle, but a little bit of extension. We then curl the wrist. When we get to that position, we've got loads of power. Like I said, that drop is really gonna help, but the rotation is so important, and very often when I see people trying to throw the overhand, they focus more on the arm instead of getting the twist of the body. And if you do not disconnect your heel, as I already mentioned, that is also a big mistake because I'm not going to be able to rotate too far and the core, the sort of trunk of my body can only go to here, as opposed to once the heel disconnects, I can get that big massive rotation. Now following up on this punch is a very key element because we don't want to hit the target and just simply stop, but we also don't want to whip through and have our head exposed for too long. So very, very important to remember that once we hit, we start bringing the hand back to the head. It's strike, follow through, and then start getting back to the cheek so we can get that coverage back on that opposite side very quick. Now let's talk about 3 setups which are going to help you land this big powerful overhand, because very simply just walking forward and trying to land, even though it's incredibly powerful, is going to minimize your chance of doing so. We need something to happen beforehand to make it more possible to land this. So number 1, as I already said, somebody rushes forward, they either throw a jab or a cross, something right down the middle, you drop that head off the center line so the shot misses, and at the same time, you smack them right in the head. This is all timing. It's like executing little slips, but at the same time, getting that overhand right in there. Great way to land this punch, and a lot of times because people are being offensive, they're not able to be defensive at the same time, so they get hit when they don't see it, which is great for the person throwing the overhand. Setup number 2 is to blind them a little bit. If we throw things from the side, they're gonna have that vision. They're gonna be able to see right down the middle, therefore they're gonna see the overhand come. But if I can pump 2 quick jabs and almost do improper technique, I don't pull all the way back, I kind of give them a touch, I hold it there at the end until I drop into my overhand, more likely that they're going to be distracted by this and miss the initial part of that movement, which again gives me more chance of actually landing. The third and final setup, which has worked so many times for so many fighters, is to cross to the body. Hit them to the body, drop your weight down a little bit, hit them to the body, and then drop your weight down, and then go with the overhand. That one works because they're going to get scared. They're going to see it again a little bit later, they're going to drop. As you drop your weight, they think, oh, cross is coming, and then you come over top. The only difference is, instead of dropping mid-punch, I just do a little drop beforehand, but still loads of power on it. I still truly believe that if you take the average person off the street and give them an hour to learn an uppercut, a hook, a cross, or an overhand, they're going to get the most power off the overhand. And in addition, we've seen so many times in UFC where people just crush their opponent with that big punch. This doesn't mean necessarily this will be your most powerful punch. But again, if I was going to break down what shots are going to create the most power in the most people, I would go with the overhand. So I hope you guys decide to try out this punch, try incorporating it into your bag work. If you have somebody holding pads for you, ask them to just hold like this. It's not a straight punch, it's not a hook, it's in between the two, and it's angled slightly downwards. That's how I hold when I'm going to be on pads for somebody else. Then you can just bomb that big shot in and get enormous amount of impact when you make contact. Let's call it there, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. As always, train hard, and I will see you back here soon for another video.